right? Universal means that it is a universally given to all, and in everything that we need is provided for us. Right? Now you got to go back to Matthew, in the book of Matthew, when Jesus is talking to the disciples, he said, why do you worry so much? Right? Look at the birds of the sky. Right? They don't store up, they don't worry about it. Don't you think your Father in heaven loves you even more? Right? Well, that's what he's talking about. You have everything you need. You talked about how beautiful things are happening here in Elkhart Lakes and Plymouth and other places, right? You have everything you need for a massive explosion of faith, if we choose to tap into it, or to not. It's our choice, right? But universally, the church lacks nothing. Apostolic, of course, comes from the apostles. It's the apostolic nature of the church. It is the tracking all the way back to the early church fathers that Jesus instituted. But the apostolic nature is missionary. We're a match, right? We're not stationary. I know we've built all these beautiful buildings, but the reality is the church is always supposed to be missionary, right? And so if we forget that, then we do not understand. If we stop being missionary, it's usually because we're afraid. I call that going back to the upper room. We have gone back to the upper room because we're afraid. We can't do it. It's society's fault. You know, the world doesn't want to know about the Lord because, you know, look at, they're into sports, they're into TV, look at the Super Bowl, and there's technology, there's all the movies, and there's all the reasons why we can't grow the church, right? Except for one thing. It was blessed. It's of God. We are missionary. He provided everything. Maybe we're looking in the wrong place. Or maybe we're part of the problem. Right? One, Holy Catholic Apostolic. That's the nature of being church. Now, to move us a step further. There's an interesting thing that happened in the first week, this Sunday. We just read the Sunday Scriptures, first week of Lent. Between this Sunday and this coming Sunday, next Sunday, two things are going to happen in our Scriptures that are going to show the total difference in Jesus. This past week, quiz 101, what was the gospel about? You can't look it up on your phone either. What temptation? The devil. Very good. All right. See, Father, I told you they'd listen. Yes, it came from the Gospel of Luke, correct? And it was the fourth chapter of Luke. I only point that out because in the fourth chapter of Luke, where is Jesus in his ministry, his public ministry? Early, middle, end? Early. So it's important to understand it, right? So Jesus, as he's beginning his public ministry, goes off into the desert, right? And it was the desert that was next to the Jordan River. Now, if you know anything about geography, what was the river? Life, right? Because, and so if you look historically, where did all the tribes, you go all the way back to Abraham, right? We heard those scripture readings. You go all the way back to Abraham. Abraham originally started in the town of Ur. Ur would be the Persian Gulf, today's language. And he had to follow up the river all the way around the top and come down. You can't cut across the desert, right? And so they always lived along the waterways. We still do today, right? The best towns are always where the waterways are, because that's where the fertile soil is. So he comes from the area of life, and he goes out to the desert, right? He spends 40 days in the desert. Who comes to visit at the end? Satan. Devil, right? Comes to visit him. Now, I have no idea what your homily was about. But, so I'm certain I'm just repeating everything. But, a couple things to point out. First of all, the devil knew who Jesus was, didn't he? And he still came after him anyway. But when did he come after him? At the beginning, in the middle, or at the end? At the end. Why did he come at the end? Because he was weak. He was vulnerable. And yet the devil knew who Jesus was. The rest of the world may not have known, but the devil knew. Right? And of course he goes through and he gives them these three temptations, right? And you might classify it as your 3 P's, right? About pleasure, food, right? And about prestige and power, right? I'll take you up or I'll drop you off this building, and right? And so, But the devil came after the Lord. He wasn't afraid to tempt the Lord. What does that mean for us? And furthermore, not only was he not successful, what's the last thing that we hear in the Gospel of Luke? He will come back again. And it's not like Jesus' power is going to get less. More people will know who he is, and the devil is going to come back again. Even though he knew Jesus could squish him like a bug if he really wanted to. What does it say for us? If he will come after the Lord, if he will tempt the Lord, if he will lure the Lord, not with weird, hey, I'm going to do a lightning storm, let's see what you can do kind of stuff, but real human temptations. Right? Man, everybody will know who you are. Right? You could be the Lord over all these people. They'll all know who you are. Wow, that's pretty human, isn't it? Right? He came after him with real human temptations. What does he come after us for? Why was Jesus so vehemently intent on making sure the disciples knew, stick together. Stay in that room till I've brought you the Spirit. The devil is real. You will be tempted. I need to make sure you have everything you need before you fight the fight. And when he finally sets them loose, when Peter finally stands up, gives the win one for the Gipper speech after Pentecost, right? And they go out to transform the world. And it keeps happening. And it spreads. And we hear in the book of Acts that every day the Lord multiplied the numbers of those who were being saved. It comes to the end of the 2nd chapter. We hear that phrase, right? And the church began to grow a little bit. And yet so did the temptations, right? What does it mean for us? Or when we look at what's happening in our church today, who might be the culprit of that? Who might be dividing the church? Who might be saying they won't come and putting that bug in your ear so that you say it all the time? Our kids won't come, right? They don't care. It's the TV's fault, right? It's the music's fault. One holy Catholic apostolic. We have everything we need to be successful. When people ask me the question, why our church isn't growing, I say, it's simple. What were they doing in the upper room? What was their training that Jesus had them doing? They were in the room and they were praying, were they not? They were doing exactly, they were in community, sharing conversation, talking about what they had seen, breaking bread, saying the prayers. We know that it's found in the book of Acts. We know exactly what they were doing in the upper room. And they waited for the Spirit to come. And then there was the true test. The real fear was, this is great, this is comfortable, but outside those doors, people are waiting to persecute us. And the real temptation was, do you leave or do you stay? Do you stay comfortable? Do you stay protected? Or do you leave? Believing that no matter what you face, God will overcome it. God will overcome it. When people ask me why your young people aren't coming, I say it's simple. We don't tell the stories anymore. I don't know if I shared this with you last time, but I do. I ask kids all the time, how did mom and dad meet? Usually they come up with something. They lived upstairs from each other, or they were co-workers, or Uncle Jim set them up, or whatever the story is, right? And I'll say, what do mom and dad do for a living? Maybe they know, they're a teacher, or they're a doctor, or something. If you happen to do something a little different, some sort of weird sales or something, they don't know, other than they might say, I don't know, he's never home, or something like that, right? But they have the basics. But when I ask the kids, as I always do, why does mom and dad believe in God? Do you know what answer I get? Nothing. Because we don't talk about it. They know our ancestry. They know how you met. They know what you do for a living. They probably even know what Grandma and Grandpa did for a living. But they don't know the one thing that actually matters. Not what you believe. Why do you believe? When have you seen the Lord? How have you come to believe? Don't tell me what I'm supposed to believe. Show me. Walk with me. Journey with me. But even here in a room, a controlled setting of all friends who had been fed, at least most of us, we almost get the willies talking about our faith in here. Right? That's not what Catholics do. Well, the evangelicals maybe do. What we do. But do you know where the evangelicals got it from? From us. What is a sacramental church? When Father's here and he breaks bread and he invites the Spirit to come down, and of course he's praying for us. That's why his hands are open. He's not stretching. He's praying for us. So every time you see the priest do this, it's called the collect. He's collecting all of our prayers. But when he breaks bread and invites us, he's inviting us into our own brokenness. Part of our brokenness is getting over ourselves, getting over our fears, getting over our anxieties of sharing faith. We don't like to share faith. That's not what we do. Do you want to know why the church isn't growing? Because we don't talk about it. We'll sing about it, right? We love to sing about it. That's our favorite thing to do. Especially the classic hymns. We love hymns, right? The older the better, right? My favorite one, Here I Am, Lord. Some of you are smiling. You like that one too, right? It's a classic, 1983. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. It's the story of Eli and Samuel, right? Literally, the story of Eli and Samuel. They put it to music from scriptures. I will go, Lord, and tell no one. You're laughing because you know that what we sing is, I will go, Lord, if you lead me, and I will go and I will tell. And you know that because that's what it says at the end of the gospel, but is it what we do? Does it happen in our own homes? In your own roof, as you sit here tonight, do your own family members, your spouse, your children, do they know why you believe? Do they know how you have experienced the Lord? When Pope Francis is begging the church to get outside, to not be stuck inside, he's using all these phrases, I want a church that's dirty, I want it out in the streets, right? We hear this phrase and the media love that because it's very catchy. But when he says, I want a church that's out, I want a church that's missionary, you cannot be missionary until you get over yourself. Because he doesn't want you to go and do charity, he wants you to embrace a human being. And he wants you to literally help them on their spiritual journey. Those of us who gather at the table and worship the Lord are sent. The sending right is to send you out into that world to change lives. How many families right here in Elkhart Lakes, in Plymouth, in Chilton, pick your favorite town in the area. How many families need to know that someone cares? Right here. And I'm not just talking about the Catholics. Who in Elkhart Lakes today got bad news about their health? Who in the surrounding area today found out that someone they know or maybe themselves are going to lose a job? Who right here in Elkhart Lakes or Plymouth is really struggling with their children? Or we're older and we're struggling with our parents. Who here is preparing to bury someone or just did? Do you understand that when we gather at table, when we break bread and we ask the Lord to come into our lives, and we accept that amen, and we accept that we want to be broken, I want to be broken for someone else. That's the sacramental church. That's what it means to be Catholic. The pride of being Catholic, when I asked you about all those things that you love, the hospitals, the schools, those were all reactionary to, I want to ease people's pain. If they're sick, we minister to them. If they're hungry or they're homeless, we minister to them. We're going to create a whole agency called Catholic Charities here in the United States. When we look domestically, we're going to call it Catholic Relief Services. When we want to go globally, we want to go throughout the United States, we're going to call it Caritas. And Catholic Relief Services is just a division of Caritas. We have a mobilized system. When people are starving, literally to death, the Catholic Church responds. My favorite story I ever